All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of Behind the Scenes of Public Safety, a podcast here at Middle School Career Readiness. Today's episode will be the last episode of season two. So next episode will be this will be the last episode of season one. Next episode will be the start of season two. I'm Reilly Rucker. I'll be your host, and today we have a dispatcher here from Austin Fire Department. So I'll let him introduce himself.
My name's Elliot. I'm a firefighter with the Austin Fire Department.
So how'd you get into a career field in dispatching in the fire service and Austin Fire specifically?
So I started with Austin Fire about 5 years ago, and at that time I'd been jumping between a bunch of different jobs, but I had a friend that was in EMS, and he kind of let me know that Austin was having his hiring process, and I didn't know anything about what being a firefighter was like at the time, but I did my research, studied for the test, and got in, and it's been the best decision that I've made. And I really enjoyed working on a truck, and as in the Austin department, you can go from a truck to these different divisions within the department, and currently I'm in the dispatch division. I made that decision for scheduling reasons and financial reasons, and to learn primarily a new skill, seeing the backside of what happens before you go to a truck, taking the call, deciding which truck is going to go, what emergency resources are all available within the city and the county as well. It gives you context for your job, and it's been really great coming here to learn about that. I've been here now for 2 years.
What's the best part or most rewarding part of your job that you would say?
Most rewarding part, I think it's working with something that matters. And, for different people, what matters to them is different. But I think it's undoubtedly true for everybody that it matters, human life and helping people with, you know, any kind of emergency that we get called with. And there's a wide variety of emergencies, but it feels meaningful, and it feels like what you're doing has risk. I think I'm a little bit of um, I like the adrenaline you get with like having to think really hard on something that's really important and time sensitive. And I would say that's the most rewarding part, is to really challenge yourself.
What would you say? Most people say paperwork to this answer, but what would you say was the worst or least favorite part of the job?
Thankfully, this job, in my current position at least, doesn't come with much paperwork. For me, I think the hardest part to get adjusted to is sometimes the sleep schedule. When you're on a truck, you get called in the middle of the night a lot, and you know it's hard as a human that wants to try to get good sleep on their off days to get used to relaxing, going to bed, knowing that you're not going to get woken up in the middle of the night. And that applies here too, except there's the added complication of we're always getting calls throughout the day 24/7. So when you sleep, you have to sleep at weird times while other people are working. So a lot of times you have to take a 4 hour sleep in the middle of the day and then stay up through the night and work some weird sleep schedules like that. I think that's probably the most challenging part.
Um, what was your first call that you handled as a dispatcher?
My first call, the boring answer is, and this is what they start everybody on, are these like alarm line calls, where it's basically just automated alarm calls from different premises throughout the city that have their fire systems monitored, and they'll send us an automatic call. That was probably my first one, but those alarm lines can sometimes get calls from other non-emergency lines, and while I was taking these fire alarm calls, one of them slipped through the cracks and got to me, and that was like I think a raccoon had gotten stuck on a power line, and he was just like standing up on top of the power line, had nowhere to go. We were trying to figure out what exactly resources we needed to figure out. And I had just gotten here, so I had no idea how you were supposed to deal with things like that.
Um, how has this job challenged you personally over your years?
Personally, I think it tests your patience a bit, because you take hundreds and hundreds of calls, and different people have different perceptions of what an emergency is. And sometimes people call when they don't have an emergency. And you still want to handle these people, with respect and let them know what their options are for dealing with that situation themselves. But that can be, sometimes, you have to exercise a good amount of patience, because you'll go from taking a very emergent call where somebody just had a severe accident and there's a car laying on top of a person and you're trying to give them the best instructions you can. And then the next caller dropped their phone and like a storm drain, and they want help with that. And so you have to kind of switch between these modes pretty quickly.
So the next category, day-to-day challenges, memorable calls. What does a typical shift look like for you?
For me, I come in at 7 a.m. and I leave at 7 a.m. the next day. I work for 24 hours straight. I come in, we get situated, we restart all of our computers and start up all of our systems. We have logins to dozens of systems that we have to get set up. And then we do our morning meetings where we catch up on all the updates and different procedures that we're going to be running that day. And throughout this, we're taking calls and then, doing the primary bulk of our job. And then somewhere in there, I sleep during the middle of the day, and then I wake back up and I take calls for about an 11 to 12-hour stretch. And then I go back to sleep at the end of my shift. And, assuming I don't get woke up, then I'll sleep through my shift change and then go home and do it again in 3 days.
Okay. What would you say, a particularly challenging call just a challenging call that you've had to deal with in your career?
I think the most challenging call I had was a suicide of a teenager at school, where she intentionally overdosed on some pills. And it took us a while to figure out that this was an intentional suicide. So we couldn't figure out what exactly was going on. It presented itself as a seizure, and we acted accordingly as if it were a seizure, but then we realized the seizure was because of, an overdose. And unfortunately, we were not able to save that person. That's a hard call. It's, working with youth and working with people who are struggling with mental issues.
Yeah. Have you ever had a call where you felt like you didn't necessarily know what to do, didn't know how to help the person, and how did you end up coping with that or helping the person?
Thankfully, when we're working, we're all working together. Whether you're on a truck or whether you're here at dispatch, you have a bunch of people to ask. Pretty daily, we have something come through that we don't really know how to handle, and or at least one person doesn't know how to handle and the other person does. So we cooperate a lot on that, especially because there's such a wide range of reasons people could be calling us. I would say maybe some I don't know how to handle are like maybe ones that have to do with jurisdictional issues. Those are the most complicated. You have multiple different agencies responding, and it's not quite sure whose responsibility it is to deal with that emergency.
What is the weirdest or funniest call you've ever had as a dispatcher?
Weirdest and funny calls. I think we get a lot of oddball ones, maybe where people think something could be true, but it might not be. Like, they might think that, I've had calls where maybe they think like their house is like electromagnetically charged in some weird way, and that, there's, it could start a fire in XYZ appliance. They always, maybe don't understand how fires have started, and they're worried, which is understandable, but maybe their worry isn't really rooted in reality. And that happens quite often. And then we also have, kind of funny calls are sometimes animal calls. You get animals, stuck in weird places or needing help with various things, and we help with that as well.
Okay. Um, how do you particularly stay calm during some of these high risk or high pressure calls that you get?
I think the most important thing is exposure. The more time that you have experiencing high pressure is the more you can be calm under pressure. Um, Different people have different tricks on how to kind of be cool in these situations, but really for most of us that came into it, we like knew that you're kind of applying for a high pressure job, and most people already are aware about themselves that they function well under that pressure.
Um, in your career as a dispatcher, have you ever experienced burnout? If so, how did you overcome that?
I think I got burnout a little bit whenever I got the hang of the job. Like when you start to get a little bit bored of the job, then I think it's easy to get burnout because then you feel like it's very monotonous, very repetitive. But then you kind of, after a little while, you realize that there are more ways to push yourself. There's more ways to learn. There's more ways you can um, expand your knowledge or be more of a leader or interact with your crew in a better way. Um, there's always more that you can be pushing yourself on, and I think as long as you're pushing yourself in a healthy way, then you'll experience burnout much less, and that's more where I'm at.
Okay. Um, in Austin Dispatch or Austin Fire, what kind of support system do they have for dispatchers?
So anybody that's a part of the Austin department has access to a, a multitude of mental health resources. One of the biggest kind of unique programs we have is a peer support program where you have chiefs, firefighters, captains, people from all sorts of ranks all over the city that are available to you that have chosen to be there for support. They're people that do the same job as you and have an understanding of exactly what you go through, and have been through it themselves. And um, those are kind of like the first line people you can go to kind of air anything that's weighing heavy on you. And then we have staff psychologists that are available to us for free, and they can push you out to other psychological resources if you need therapy or if you need support in other ways.
Okay. And how do you like decompress after your a tough shift or just a normal shift once you get done and go home?
I think, how do I decompress? I mean, taking off the uniform is like one thing. Like, I think you kind of put yourself in like a state of mind when you get into your uniform, when you come to work, and then when you get home, you have to literally and figuratively put it away. There's a mental shift that takes practice there. I'm at home now, like I'm not commanding a fire scene. I'm not listening for emergencies. Like I can be more at ease.
Okay. What advice do you have for someone who might be struggling with the toll of this job?
I think the best thing you can do, there's a lot of different things you can do, but I find that the best thing you can do is to connect with your crew. They're the people that understand what you're going through the best because they do the same job and they see the same things you're seeing. And you already have a good relationship with them personally. Like, I think those are the people that, if you take a step back and connect with your crew and you feel safe with your directly people you're experiencing the heaviness of the job with, then it just naturally processes much better and much more healthy.
Um, how do you collaborate with other firefighters in the dispatching center and also first responders on the ground?
How do we communicate with them
Yeah.
and what's it look like? So whenever we get information from a caller. We enter information into basically a CAD. It's one of our systems that has our map in it. It has all of the calls that are going on in the city, and that's linked to the truck. So anything we type in there, they're driving to this emergency in the truck, and they're reading off the screen in their truck, and they see anything that we put in, and that comes directly from us call takers. There's also a dispatching side who actually talks to them physically on the radio, and I'll have more of a back and forth communication with them. This is with call taking, it's a one way. I just give them information in the call text and they read it. But if they have a question, they send it to the dispatcher and they can talk about it. And through that kind of chain of communication, we can clarify any questions they have as they're responding to emergency.
Okay. What's one thing you knew that you wish the public knew about dispatchers?
I think it's not like this everywhere, so it's kind of a hard ask, but it would be good for people to know. I think that the dispatchers down here and the call takers down here are firefighters. They're the same people that you're asking for out in the field, and so they kind of understand your issue. I think if they knew that, they would be a little bit more compliant in our questioning and understand why we're asking things. Give us maybe a bit of the benefit of the doubt of why certain questions are important to each emergency.
What do you think is a misconception that people have about dispatchers?
Misconception. Maybe just one of the lighter ones is that we're maybe more of like nerdy or like we're good with computers or something. A lot of firefighters don't even own a computer, so there's sometimes a misconception that we're a little geekier, but in my experience that's not necessarily true. We definitely have a lot of people down here that have just gotten really good at one finger typing. We make do with the tech skills we have.
How has your role as a dispatcher evolved from when you first started to where you are now?
You slowly start to pick up more and more responsibility. You start off taking very basic calls, and then you take more difficult calls, and then you start to monitor radio channels where you're listening at fires or you're listening at vehicle rescues, and then you're starting to have talk back and forth and get them the resources they need, and that responsibility just continues to grow. And there's always more that you can be doing as a dispatcher, especially in my role, and supporting your supervisors and helping them kind of organize anything throughout the day and make their job easier. So yeah, it definitely has grown a good amount, and I think probably lately the more it's grown into is kind of supporting like a training side. We have a lot of new people coming through, and then you want to pass your knowledge as much as you can to the next people.
Okay. What is it like handling emergency calls during like large scale incidents, or if there's like a major event going on in the city, managing calls while those are going on?
Yeah, so we divide and conquer. You'll have one person focus on that incident specifically, and as the incident grows, if you need more people dedicated to that incident, then you will. Like some of the bigger ones are wildfires, for example. Whenever those spread, you have to have like a dedicated person that's very aware of all the resources that are coming in from different jurisdictions and different areas, and then sometimes you need two people monitoring that call just to manage it, or sometimes on a 2 alarm fire, you're having a bunch of additional units come. You need one person dedicated just to the second wave of units, and then one person dedicated to the first that are already there on scene working. So yeah, we try to divide big jobs into little jobs, and that's really all we do.
Do you ever get to meet the people that you help over the phone?
We don't. I'm trying to think if that's ever happened. I don't think that's happened yet. It's not a common occurrence. It would be nice to kind of maybe like see a little bit of the impact you've made. But that's also maybe a little bit of a challenge when you come down here. You have to get used to hearing about an emergency, helping somebody, and then it just goes out into the wind. You never hear about it again.
Yeah. Are there? I know I asked you this when we were over there. Are there ones who answer the call, separate person who dispatches unit, separate person who manages radios? Are they all one role or are they separate roles?
We're all cross trained in dispatching and call taking, which are the two major disciplines that we have. So we can do either, but we generally have supervisors as dispatchers, and they're the ones that see the big picture and see where every truck is going and make sure that the right units are there and they fulfill resource requests from people out in the field. And then there's the call takers, which each call that comes in, they enter the information and send it to the truck, and then they're done. They assign when there's no call going on, they're pretty laid back. So those are kind of dispatcher is more like a steady state job, and then call taking is more like spikes of more higher intensity work, and then no work for a little while.
Okay. This set of questions are ones that I took from different places like Reddit, Indeed, all these different websites.
Sure.
So questions from the public, I guess you could say. Can you describe the training process that new dispatchers go through and any ongoing professional development opportunities?
The training process. So if you're going to be a dispatcher for the Austin Fire Department, then you first need to be a firefighter, and that requires years of experience out in the field, at least a few years, and going through all of that process. The dispatch specific part is you come down here and you make at least a 2-year commitment, so you can't leave this division until you've fulfilled your 2 years, and it starts with just learning what all of our technology is, how each system works, how each agency is interconnected, and the different kind of ways that we request other agencies for support. And then it goes into the grit of it, which is that we start taking calls, like I was kind of saying earlier. You start with the easy calls and it gets progressively harder. But that training period where you're coming every day and training is about 2 months long at most, and then you start to come here on shift and you continue to train, but you're on the 24-hour schedule.
Okay. The next question is, what are the most common types of emergency calls in your jurisdiction and how do you prioritize?
We in Austin are thankfully staffed enough to go to every emergency. There are departments that have to put some on the back burner, but for the most part, if there's not a citywide crisis going on, like a massive freeze or a lack of units due to a severely large wildfire, then we have the units to send to every call. We don't have to make prioritization kind of decisions very often. But the most common types of calls we get, aside from just general fire alarms, which is kind of a very, very common call, is trash fires, people experiencing homelessness, burning things throughout the green belt or along public spaces, and grass fires. A lot, and especially when it's dry out, we get grass fires spotted all throughout the city for various amount of reasons or causes.
Okay. Next one is how does your shift schedule work? What are the challenges that it presents maintaining your work and professional life balance?
Sorry, could you repeat that question one more time?
What is your shift schedule like, and what challenges does that present in maintaining your work and personal life balance?
Here, I feel like I have a very good work-life balance. I work for 1 day straight, 24 hours straight, and then I'm off for 3 days for 72 hours. And it's a lot of time off. You're very tired when you come back from the first day and you need a good day of recovery. But aside from that, you get a good amount of time to spend with your family and enjoying your hobbies and the things that recharge you. So I would say the balance is pretty good here, and the amount of time we work versus we're off is very rewarding.
Okay. What tools or technology do you use in daily operations, and how have they evolved over time?
I think maybe the one that's evolved the most is our ability to track callers. We've gotten this new system where our old one was called Rapid SOS, and you had to manually input somebody's phone number, and then it would start to track them. And even that little step can get in the way sometimes of efficiency when you have a high emergency, a high risk kind of emergency. And especially if it's like traffic accidents are another one of our major calls. If somebody's driving by and you're taking the time to put in their number and you maybe didn't even do it immediately because you were asking some other emergency questions, by the time you're tracking, they could be a mile away from the accident and then you don't have a good location anymore. So we've recently gotten some new systems that allow us to, as soon as they call, it starts tracking and it shows us exactly where they are. And it works very well. So things are definitely always growing down here or evolving.
And this one we talked a little bit again when we were over there. How do you collaborate with other services like police, um, EMS, and TxDOT, Texas Gas, all different?
We all share the same building, which is it's nice to be able to kind of just have the same space as them. But for the most part, we end up calling them just because we're not going to go across the building or like yell across the building. So we generally just hotline. We just have a quick button to talk to any of them. And most of the requests are generally pretty standard. Like, sometimes we'll need blocking units or we'll need the highway shut down. Those are quick calls, and maybe we'll call Austin Water like we did this morning because somebody crashed into a hydrant and we need to make sure that the hydrant is maintenance, things like that.
What qualities do you believe is essential for someone to succeed as a dispatcher?
Quality is, I think you have to, the biggest requirement is that you can sit in a chair for 12 hours working the whole time. Like you have on and off periods, but you have to be able to sit still in one spot for 12 hours without seeing daylight or really leaving your chair much. That's probably the hardest requirement. But in terms of the actual job itself, I think you need to be a critical thinker for sure. You have to be somebody that wants to know kind of, you have to be able to build a picture of the whole emergency scene in your head. And so you have to be able to ask the questions that are really pertinent to building out what the risks are, what the firefighters want to know that are coming in, and to really put yourself in those shoes. That's kind of why we at Dispatch are firefighters, is because we've been on those scenes and we've seen them, and it helps us kind of understand what's really going on.
How do you handle situations where the caller is unable to communicate their emergency effectively?
So we have a call type called an unknown call type, and that just sends a single truck to go assess what's going on. That could happen when somebody is too frantic to explain what's going on. They're saying they want a fire, that there is a fire, but they can't pull the words together, or they refuse to answer in some cases, or there's some kind of technical issue and we're not able to get more information. We have a call type for that, and we do send to those. Sometimes it's a matter of, when you've been down here so long, you can tell by the tone of somebody's voice and kind of context whether you hear them in a car. Does it sound like they're on Bluetooth? Does it Does it sound like there's people screaming in the background? You can kind of piece together what that emergency might be, and you can preemptively send additional resources. But we'll always send. It's just kind of, you got to do your best at shooting in the dark if you don't have a lot of information.
Uh, can you describe a time when you had to make a quick decision without direct supervision, and how did you handle that?
Hmm. We a lot. That's honestly most of our job. Most of the time, we have a supervisor that's available, but we're mostly making decisions on our own. And some of those really critical decisions are whether or not to send the higher level of emergency or the lower level of emergency. Like sometimes people will say, "Oh, there's somebody trapped in the car," and then we need to decide: are we sending a chief? Are we sending extra rescue units for tools? Are we sending a bunch of extra people to help out, or are they just saying they're trapped, but it's just really their door is just jammed and they're not able to open it? So you're making these critical decisions that really kind of change how the outcome of the scene is going to be um, on your own every day. So,
Uh, what strategies do you employ to handle multiple high priority calls simultaneously?
so we take it one call at a time for the most part. If there's more calls coming in than we have available people to answer those calls, then a red light will go off, and that lets us know that there's people waiting to talk to us essentially. And for those, it's just, again, you need to know what's actually important and what's kind of excessive questioning, and so you just get what's really needed at a minimum, and what's needed for the proper response, and then you let them know, like, here's your safety instructions, here's what I need you to do, I gotta let you go, so take the next
Um, what is some advice you would have for someone who is considering this career?
one. My advice would be to learn about the department that you're interested in, and then do a ride out with them would be, I think, the first step. Just see what the station life is like, see what the people are like, because there are all types of people in the department, but there is also an underlying like type of personality in the department, and some people resonate with that and some people don't. I think it's important to meet firefighters before you decide to be a firefighter, um, so you can tell if that's kind of, if that's the environment that you're interested in. I didn't do that. It thankfully worked out, but I would say that that would be my advice: is to go out, ask for a ride out, meet some people, see what kind of impression they leave, see if they're your kinds of people, and if they are, then you'll be quite happy with the job.
Um, and our last question, I know I asked you this earlier when we were at the dispatching area. What do you think, or have you watched 911 Lone Star?
I haven't watched it. I haven't really watched that many emergency 911 shows, but I do think they're entertaining, and if they get people more interested in the job, then that's fun. I mean, I've watched Brooklyn Nine-Nine, which is based off of Police, and I'm sure Police think that's an absolutely ridiculous show. So I guess I understand the entertainment.
All right, well, that's our last question we have. Thank you for being willing to do this interview,
Of course.
taking the time out of your day to do it. For those of you who are watching, thank you for staying till the end. If you would like to subscribe, you can go down and do that. If you would like to donate, there are two ways to do that. We do have a Cash App in the description, as well as our Refuge Medical affiliate link. If you purchase anything from there, you get a 10% discount with the link, and then 10% of your order does go to us to help us fund more interviews like this. And so, with that, we're going to end our video.